I'm the treasurer, and I want to remind everybody to get online and renew your membership in the club. So, yep.
Next month's meeting will be the 9th. Hopefully we'll be back in the other room where we belong. We're on the schedule. We're looking for volunteers for presentations like we're getting tonight. So reach out to Terry if anybody's interested in doing anything. Tonight we're, oh, okay, Paul, you did the treasury report pretty much? Are you good with that or?
Yeah, I don't have any numbers.
Okay. We got money in the bank? Nothing bounced? Okay, we're good. All right.
For the toilet.
Oh, thanks. Thanks from June?
Yeah.
Oh,
They didn't get me the bill until October.
okay. Well, good, because there's one thing a guy can't live without is the throne. All right, our guest speaker tonight, Paul.
Looking out, everybody that had won one of the offset attenuators from that last box, we got those come in. We just want to find a time where we can all sit down and make those things. So once we get that schedule, we'll get those to you.
Why don't you repeat that on there?
The offset, I didn't know anything about it.
The offset attenuators there were one at the last fox hunt are now in, and so you need to get a hold of Nathan Hire and figure out a time and a place to put those together, right? How do they get a hold of you? Are you on QRZ? You have your email on QRZ.com. Okay, when you go home tonight, do that. Okay, he's good on QRZ. N8HYR. Okay.
Okay, the first step is the path to safety. This is your personal fall arrest system. You need to be aware of the hazards you're going to encounter. You're going to need the training and preparation needed for the job at hand if something does happen. So many times people will do the tower climbing or fall protection and all those things, and they will not have a plan in place if something would happen. Stuff does happen, and it's always good to have it at least. Go ahead there. Well, first off, let's talk about understanding a lot of people refer to as acronym PFAS, which is your personal fall arrest system. We're going to go over the different types there are. There's 4 categories we're going to cover. The inspection procedure, your fit and adjustment. We're going to talk about the different types of lanyards and anchor points. And finally, we're going to talk about how OSHA works and how it ties in with your different types of safety harnesses. Go ahead there, Paul. There's 4 classes. You have a class 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's only one of these classes that you can actually use as a fall arrest system. I have some demonstrations here as well to show you guys. So if you haven't ever dealt with fall protection equipment, you're at least going to be able to have a chance if you want to come and play with it and look at it and things like that. So let's go ahead and start off here with class 1. A class 1 harness, commonly known as a body belt, is simply just the single belt that goes around your waist. Years ago, you'd see people climbing with just these on. If you get old timers, may have seen people do that before. That is not a fall arrest system. These are designed only to restrain you or position yourself in work. That's all they're for. Even per OSHA and all tower safety standards, this is not a fall protection method. This is actually just for positioning. There are a few exceptions where certain types of harnesses can be used in concrete rebar, but when it comes to tower work, this is a no. You do not use these for fall arrest. Go ahead there. The class 2 harness, this is a chest harnesses where they're limited falls and hazards. Usually your retrieval or safety personnel that are doing your reports, like if somebody has a fall and they have to retrieve them wearing this. I have one right here. Think of like your rock climbers. This would be more apt to what a class 2 harness is. Should have one right here if I wasn't so messed up. Oh, there it is. This is the class 2 harness. Like I said, think rock climbing or rappelling and stuff like that. It is where because you shouldn't be falling. If you fall when you're climbing, you're going to have a bad day. But this is, think of like your rock climbing harnesses. That'd be a class 2 harness. This is not a fall protection or approved fall protection harness. A lot of people are like, well, they use it for climbing, so it works. No, it is not an approved fall protection harness. Go ahead and go to the next one here. This is your class 3 harness. This is your full body harness that actually distributes the force between your whole body. That would be this guy right here. This is your class 3, a full body where the tie-off anchor point is in the center of your back, right here on your shoulder blades. This is what OSHA and even all of your tower regulations would consider a fall protection harness. This is because they're designed to help dissipate the force between your whole body if a fall would occur. Many times like this one, they'll have the body belt built in for helping you for your, if you're trying to position yourself or anything. We'll talk about positioning devices here in a bit, but this would be what OSHA and all of your tower climbing and everything would consider your fall protection harness, not the other two. This is the only thing that's approved right here. If you're not wearing a full body harness and you're climbing a tower, you're being stupid. And I forgot to also mention, if at any time any of you guys have any questions or anything like that, just raise your hand, get my attention, because there's no such thing as a stupid question, just stupid people. And I do this all the time, and it's always the people. You may have a question and think, oh, this is a stupid question, I'm not going to ask it. I guarantee somebody else has the same question. So let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. The last class is class 4. These are your class 4 harnesses. These are often like your boat swing chairs. Think of your window cleaners and the big skyscrapers and stuff like that. That would be a class 4 harness or a class 4 type of safety device for either falls or rappelling down buildings and stuff like that for maintenance and construction and things like that. This is not a fall protection harness. This is not approved. But you can see them everywhere. And I always get this question a lot. I had this happen in some classes I taught in the past. He said, hey, you know, I bought this item online that we use in the bedroom and it says class 4 OSHA approved. No, that is not a fall protection harness. So yeah, some of you guys got the joke there, but I kid you not, apparently they're OSHA approved. I did not know that until that class. And all of his coworkers just slowly turned their heads and went like this. And next thing you know, I think he disappeared for most of the rest of the class. Go ahead to the next slide there. The biggest thing with your fall protection harnesses is in the inspection process. The area that most people fail to do is they'll grab their harness because they use it every day and just throw it right on. Before you ever do any climbing every day, before you do anything, you need to inspect your harness. And there are some certain steps you go through. I like to tell people, if you contact the manufacturer, they'll even give you a checklist to go through for your climbing harness or your fall protection harness. They'll give you a checklist. But there are some basic things you have to do. The first thing you do is you have to inspect all the webbing on the harness. That's every bit, the shoulders all the way down to the back to where it goes around your legs. Everything has to be inspected. You're looking for frays, tears. If you work around people that weld, check for melts and welding burns, because those welders are really good at destroying stuff. But you're going to check for everything. And you're also going to look for, especially for tower work, UV damage. If you have a faded harness that's been out in the sun, it's lost a lot of its integrity and it might need to be replaced. And that's something you got to check with the manufacturer to find out where its wear limits are. The other thing you're going to look at is all the D-rings on the harness, like your back D-rings, every D-ring on the harness you're going to inspect. You're going to look for bends, breaks, cracks, excessive wear. I've seen harnesses on the back where they're used every single day, and over time, the hooks will wear down the D-ring. And so if you have a harness that's used every day, and you got to make sure that that thing is not wore down, all right? You're going to check all of them. Even your positioning D-rings, check those as well. The new ones still do have the bungee stuff in them. It's basically a shock absorption. The only thing with the class 4 ones, they're going to be a little stiffer than like you'd use with like your personal fall arrest system. But they do still have it in case something would happen. You have your sudden jerks and stuff like that, so you don't have the sudden impact. Good question. Other things you're going to inspect basics are like your buckles. If you have any types of buckles on there, like a lot of them for your leg supports and stuff like that, you'll have the buckles. You're going to check all the grommets, eye loops, anything like that where you're going to have a lot of wear very closely. And any of your friction mating buckles, those guys tend to wear the nylon if you take them off and on and adjust them. It's more common if you're sharing harnesses with other people where people are constantly adjusting the harness, because the friction buckles will really wear the webbing if they're always constantly being adjusted. Go ahead. Other thing is your quick release buckles. These guys, I have seen them wear. This one has like your slip, your friction lock type things, but your ones that have your genuine buckles, the quick release buckles, those guys, the inside mechanisms will wear when they're taken off and on all the time. And so you need to make sure they're still lashed and they're secure. Make sure they're not getting sloppy. They're not getting a lot of play in them, because once they start getting worn, you can take a buckle and it'll actually shimmy. And if it starts shimmying on you, the buckle's getting too worn. And that harness is, see ya. The last thing, on most modern fall arrest systems, your back shoulder blade up here where the D-ring is for your safety line right here is going to have breakaway points, like illustrated right here in the diagram. They'll actually have points here. If it's ever had a fall or a partial fall, it'll tear the little plastic ridges out of back behind by the D-ring here. It's still supported with the webbing, but it tears those notches out just to tell somebody that it's had excessive pressure put on there, and so the harness is no good. Because if it's ever had any type of damage we talked about, if it has that, it's no good. It's basically for show. In some of my demonstrations I have harnesses that have actually had falls, and I show them where all the different breaks and things happen and what to look at if they have any damage. Go ahead. When you're adjusting your harness, when you're putting it on, you guys, this is probably just as important as the inspection process. Because remember, if it's not adjusted properly, it'll actually snap you. If you happen to rely on your harness, it'll break you and break ribs and all kinds of stuff if stuff slips where it's not supposed to slip. And gentlemen, you want to make sure the leg section is adjusted properly. And once you have it on, you need to be able to smoothly and easily do a squat without damaging anything. If you have problems there and you have a fall, I don't think I need to explain any more there. It needs to be adjusted properly. Properly adjusted harness, you should be able to have your friend go up behind you, pull up on the D-ring, put pressure on the D-ring, and you have just enough room to barely squeeze your hand behind their shoulder blades. Just barely get your hand in behind there. If you have more room than that, it's too sloppy. And that means the harness can give and move and the shoulder straps can dig in different places you're not supposed to, and it will not distribute the weight correctly. And so it's really important that if you are going to be wearing a harness, get with somebody that actually knows how you're supposed to properly adjust them and make sure it's adjusted properly. Because if you've never put one on, you're going to think everything's good to go, and you're going to have the guy walk up behind you that's done it before and yank up on the D-ring, and you're going to find out, guess what? It's not adjusted. And so you guys need to check on that. If you want more information on that, get with me after the thing or contact me. I'm on QRZ and all that stuff and everything as well, and I'm more than happy to give you more information on that. But let's go ahead and go to the next slide there. But when we talk about the fall arrest system, it's not just the harness itself. You have the lanyards and you have the anchor points. These are just as important as your harness. I've seen guys where like, oh, I'll just do a figure eight and tie it off of a rope. Anybody ever seen what happened if you put a chain on the back of a truck and then somebody else gives it gas? What happens to the bumper? You're probably going to tear the bumper off. What do you think is going to happen to you if you're just using a solid fixed rope and you fall? You're going to have a sudden jar. When you fall just 6 feet, a 200-pound male will actually impact with a force of up to 12 to 1,400 pounds of force from 6 feet. That is how much force is being put on your body when you have just 6 foot of fall. And the bigger the fall, the greater that force is going to be. And that's why we have to use what's called shock absorbing lanyards. How they're designed is if you have a fall, they have tearaway points. So it actually gives as you fall to absorb the shock. And then theoretically, the rest of the absorption, it's going to be about 30% of it's going to be absorbed in the lanyard, and the other is going to go through your harness, which if you have on correctly, distributes the force through your whole body. But I will tell you, if you fall in a harness, and even if everything's perfect, you're still going to be hurting. It is not a comfortable ordeal, even just 6 feet. But you'll be alive, and that's the big thing. So let's talk about some harnesses here, or not harnesses, but the lanyards. What this is, oh, go back a slide there. Just back arrow should do it. Yeah, there we go. This would be like another one of your types of shock absorbing lanyards. You see how it looks all accordion shaped. What it is there's fibers inside this nylon sheath that are designed to break away in the event of a fall. So each stitch that pops, it's absorbing the part of that force that's going down. And so all the stitching will pop. Part of your inspection process, because guess what? You have to inspect these as well. And you need to inspect them just as thoroughly as your harness itself. But you're going to actually look and make sure that they haven't been used in a fall before. The types of clips they have to have. They cannot have a basic clip that can just open and close. It has to have a 2-part system where you have to physically do one step and do a second step to be able to open and close the clip. And that's so there's no chance of you accidentally opening when it's attached to anything. But this is a single shock absorbing lanyard. When you're doing tower climbing, people are like, well, how am I going to go up the tower if I got to keep hooking on and stay attached? I've had guys actually talk to me about that and climbing stuff like your wind energy, doing ladder work or stuff like that. That's why you have shock absorbing lanyards that are tandem. So you can always be attached to an attachment point even as you switch the position. So you can take one lanyard, go up, bring the other one up as you go up the tower or ladder, whatever you're climbing. So you're always attached. And that's the number one thing, is that you're always attached. Something that's a misconception, we'll get to this one here in just a sec. A misconception is that you have like your cables and sometimes you have the bracket bars where you're attached to on the front of your harness, that people think that's a fall protection device, the steel cables going up. Believe it or not, that is not what you're supposed to rely on for fall protection. Those are actually more for positioning and a secondary safety is all that is. It is not your fall protection system. Your fall protection system is the lanyard and harness. But we will talk to that in a bit here. But like I said, like this guy attaches to a rope or a guideline going up, but it also has the breakaway as well. That's what this area is here, is a rip away area to help absorb the shock. There we go. Other type of fall protection for your lanyards is your self-retracting lifelines. These guys are great, but believe it or not, they're not very tower friendly. How they work is it's actually like a zip line that the minute it fills the centrifugals in there feel a force of a drop, it automatically stops and locks. It makes it so you don't have like a big long 6-foot fall, but if you're trying to move around on a tower, they're very big and bulky and they can get in the way, and it can sometimes be more of a hazard than using like a lanyard or that type. And as far as like carabiners are considered, I've seen guys do this before. Oh, I got this standard carabiner I'm going to use. You have to use special types of carabiners when you're using fall protection. And like everything, I brought those with me today here as well. At least I think I threw them in the bag. I saw them earlier. Oh, there they are. How the carabiners work on your fall protection, once again, it just can't be a simple, oh, open and close. They have to have like your 2-part where you have to physically either push down, twist, or whatever to be able to open them up. But you got to watch out. I have seen these guys before where if you have them up on the surface, they can roll. You can actually roll and open the carabiner up and pop it open. And so that's why I really like the hook type versus the carabiners, but there are carabiners that are approved for fall protection. This one would be an example of one that is not approved for fall protection. A standard, it's rated for the weight, but it does not have any type of secondary lock mechanism on it. So I want to make you guys very clear on that. This one is not approved for fall protection, whereas the ones that have the locking mechanisms for secondary lock or they actually physically lock are approved, as long as they're under the correct weight class. Now we were talking a little bit about rope and cable grabs. So often guys look at these guys that they're part of the fall protection. They're more of a guide system or a secondary fall protection system. They are not made to be your primary fall protection. They can either be ropes or things like that. And like we said, I had it here just a second ago. They come in all different shapes and sizes. This one right here is for rope. Your cable ones are built a little bit differently because they're binding on the steel cables versus the rope. But the same principle, downward force puts pressure against the line so it can't move. But most time these are used in your positioning devices, which we'll talk about here in a bit, because in your tower climbing, you got to have positioning devices. Because if you're up there standing on the edge of a tower trying to do work up there, you got to have something to lock yourself in place so you're not moving and jawing around so you can actually take care of the work while you're up there. And then when we're talking about anchor points, there's all different types of anchors are available. The example right there would be like a temporary anchor. You could just loop around a metal bar or a pipe or something like that to have an anchor point. But go ahead and go to the next slide there. But the important thing with any anchor point, wherever you attach on the tower, per OSHA standard, your anchor point has to handle 5,000 pounds of force. And that is why I always tell people, make sure the tower you're climbing actually is rated to be climbed. If it's a tower that's not made to be climbed, it will not be rated to handle any type of force like that. And there's a reason they have the rating. It's not because it's not strong enough to climb, it's because it's not strong enough to support a fall. And that's actually part of the rating system, how it works. is whether or not it can support the fall. And so that's a misconception a lot of people have. And so when you're climbing, you see how he's tied off right there. That's actually a tandem lanyard he has right there. We can't see the other side there. Off to the left of him right there, he has his positioning rope, which ironically looks very similar to that one, but it's a positioning device. And your positioning cables, they can actually be a steel core because you're not going to be falling on this. This is just to hold you in place. Go ahead, sir. The next thing we have to look at, like I said, this was a brief overview of the harness and the lanyards associated. An actual fall protection course, a full OSHA one, is about 4 to 6 hours long. And so we wouldn't have time tonight to do that. So, but if you'd like more information, just reach out to me. This is actually what I do training for CSI for fall protection. So just reach out to me and I'm more than happy to give you more information. Now, potential hazards and risk assessment. This is just as important as your fall protection. Because one, prior to you doing any work, you need to evaluate what are the potential hazards or risks associated with the tower you're climbing. And this goes, if anything, where you're doing ladder work, working on tower antennas. You have to actually evaluate. One, you got to know, are there any electrical hazards? You need to know this, because if not, if there's electrical hazards, you got to understand how lockout tagout works. How do you de-energize that power source and make sure nobody can turn it on? I'm pretty sure you don't want to be on the tower when somebody turns on the power. The next one is weather conditions, especially this time of the year. Metal, whether or not you see it or not, it can be slick and icy because of frost and everything else. Icy or wet metal is very slick, and that creates some severe slipping hazards if you're climbing the tower. The other thing you have to be aware is, are there any chances of any type of equipment failure you can encounter while you're on the tower? What are the tower conditions, especially important when doing repairs? Are you doing repairs on a tower because of a storm? If there's damage to the tower, you have to be aware of that. Is there damage that's going to cause a structural integrity that may make it unclimbable? So that's something you have to look at. You're going to look at the equipment and tools being used. What hazards will they pose while you're up on the tower? I've seen people use cordless power tools up on tower work before, or different structures. Could you get injured by the power tools, and how could you get injured? Need to be aware of that. You also need to be aware of falling objects. This is especially important if you're repairing equipment that's wind damaged. I've seen chunks of stuff fall off of ladders and things like that from damage. Think if you had a Yagi antenna up there that was half broken off and it decided to completely break off while you're on the tower. It's really important to evaluate all this. And this is one a lot of people don't realize: fatigue. You're not as tough as you think you are. If you're going to be up in a tower or working on tower work all day long, it is tiring. It is extremely tiring. And you guys used to do ladder work and stuff like that. It takes a lot out of you if you're out up on ladders and up hanging out all day with just your legs up there hanging out in the open breeze. So make sure that you're well rested and you actually have the ability to climb a tower. Next slide there. Try the arrow there. There we go. Like I said, icy towers are a dangerous thing, and you don't want to end up like the guy on the right there. You want to stay upright and happy and smiling and enjoying the view. Go to the next slide there. Training and preparation. The key to a successful climb is actually the appropriate training and preparation, and this needs to include a complete understanding of fall protection, even more so than I gave you here today. Good fall protection would be to actually suit up and put a harness on 2 or 3 times. To look at the equipment, play with the equipment, actually try climbing some ladders and stuff like that first to get a feel for how it feels to climb in a harness. Some of the harnesses weigh a lot, and the equipment you're going to be hanging off of you can also weigh a lot. So keep that in mind. You need to learn about lockout tagout if you're not familiar. If you need to talk to an electrician or another safety person that teach you about how to lock out a circuit, do it. But it's really important. You need to make sure that nobody can energize anything. You may have to do physical training to help combat the fatigue. If you've never climbed a tower before, and even though you think, oh, I climb ladders and all this stuff all the time, it's a lot different. You're going to have fatigue. It's a lot different muscles used on than you use for climbing a ladder even. Okay. So I want you guys to be aware of that. I've seen people climb like your huge long ladders on windmills and stuff like that before, and they think they have it under control. They get halfway, and those guys think they're going to die because their calves are just burning. And especially on towers, because towers aren't like flat rungs like on a ladder. You're in very awkward, weird positions on those things. So keep that in mind. Can you guys name any more things we could do for training and preparation we should think about before we climb a tower? I was about to say hydration. That's a good one. Maybe not that hydration, but well, I guess if you fall, you won't know. So, but no, hydration, that's an important one. You don't realize that when you're up there in the breeze, that can suck a lot of moisture out of you in a fast time. And this is one that nobody ever thinks about. Go to the bathroom before you start climbing. I'm dead serious. Yeah, I'll be the first one to admit that I've been climbing stuff before. You get up there, you're like, crap. So let's just say make sure to take care of that business as well before you go on the tower. Anything else you guys can think of that's something you should do for preparing for a tower? Who said that? Bingo, rescue plan. We'll be getting to that here at the end section there, but yep, the rescue plan. Before you ever ascend anything, you need to have a full plan on what would happen and how you would deal with it for any case scenario almost. Oh, let's see, this is a good group. Go ahead. Bingo. You should never do this alone. Even when I put in a power pool a couple of years ago, and I was running the conduit up the pole and everything tied off and everything up there. And even though it was just my wife down below at the bottom of the ladder watching me, I made sure somebody was there at all times just in case something would happen. It would not be a good day if I flipped off the ladder and I was just hanging there for the rest of the day. And my wife thinking like, gosh, the house is so quiet today. No, but yeah, it's excellent point. Always have somebody else there ready to go just in case. You got to have somebody call 911. Actually, when you climb tall things like that, it's actually if you're not afraid of heights, it's kind of invigorating because your views are amazing. Now, preparing for the climb. One, like we talked about, you have to evaluate the tower. Like I said, whether or not it can even be climbed. You're going to inspect and prepare your fall protection. We talked about that. You're going to go through it carefully. And how often are we going to inspect it? Every time. If I go to lunch and I come back and I put it back on, am I going to inspect it again? Yes, you are. You're always going to inspect it. What's the chances that up there you could have a sharp edge or something like that, you could damage some webbing? It can happen. You're going to prepare the tower for the climb. That could be de-energizing. That could be shutting off things. There's a lot of things depending whatever the tower needs before you can make sure it's secure and you can go up. You're going to make sure you are hydrated and well rested before climbing. It does not mean you go out partying the night before and then decide to climb a tower the next day. You need to be well rested. You're going to make a plan prior to ascending the tower. You're going to figure out when are you going to take breaks, how often, and about how long is the work going to take. You're going to have to see if you're going to have to come down for a lunch break, or is this going to be like a half a day ordeal? You have to plan all that ahead of time. Something else is you need to prep all the necessary tools and equipment. There is nothing worse. It's an inconvenience when you climb a ladder and you forget something. It's a nightmare if you climb a tower and forget something. It can happen. I've heard of cases where people have gone up there and had the wrong size wrenches or tools or disassembly tools, and they get all the way up there. And what do they get to do? They get to come back another day to do the job because you're climbing all the way up, and you got to climb all the way back down. And it's not so much the going down that's fatiguing, it's the going up. And if it's a tall tower, it's going to take it out of you. So a lot of times you got to come back the next day to redo the job. So make sure you have all the tools and everything you need before you go up. And last but not least, you're going to have an emergency plan in place. Excellent. Next slide there. Oh, go ahead.
Anybody that's working with you really should have a hard hat on so they have a tool drop.
Yep. All right, talking about some of the personal protective equipment. You're right on top of things here. The first thing on the list is a hard hat, but not just for the climber. Anybody working below. We did an experiment at a safety training I was at years ago where we were up about, it was a 2-story building. We were dropping objects into a surface to see how big of an impact they made. And if you're up there in the tower and you just drop a screwdriver, that's going to kill somebody. It'll kill you. Or just a wrench or things like that. So it's very important that anybody working around the tower is wearing hard hats. The best case scenario is you should not be working directly under those above you if they're doing work up there, in the case they drop something. We used to work with, when we'd be up on ladders and scaffolds and stuff like that, if we were holding tools, we'd often use just the open end of the wrenches. And we'd actually have the box ends actually attached to us, just to make sure they couldn't fall. It made things kind of a pain in the butt when you're trying to take off faster and stuff like that, but it means that you're not going to drop them. And believe it or not, that actually really sucks if you're using the wrench and you drop it. It's not so much even the risk of falling to somebody else, it's the risk of you don't have the tool anymore. Yep. Other thing you got to think about is when you're up there in a tower, make sure to wear the approved safety glasses. You guys are up there, you don't realize this, but you need to wear eye protection. And from experience being up in the air, your standard like safety glasses are great. But if you get into wind, any wind conditions at all, or dust can come through, or particulates, or birds, we won't talk about birds right now. Make sure you get ones that can actually have this full side shield to help block out dust, debris, and particulates, especially if you're in the wind. It's really important when you're up in the air like that. You may not see anything down below, but once you get in the air, you'd be amazed how dirty the air can be up above, depending on the wind currents. These do not, but they do actually make, UVEX makes safety glasses that can do the block out that actually fit over regular glasses. UVEX does have some models like that, and so does, who's the other one? 3M, I'm sure, does as well. The other thing I always like to tell people on tower climbing is your gloves. I've seen guys like, I got tough hands, we'll just, whatever. I'm sorry. I don't care how tough your hands are. If you find a piece of metal that's like a razor blade, it's going to cut you. You want to wear cut resistant gloves. I always tell people when you're dealing with metal towers and stuff like that, you want to wear cut resistant gloves. There's all different styles and everything depending on the temperature you're going to be working at. Because if it's really cold, you got to dress accordingly. Like these guys right here are your ANSI-approved cut-resistant gloves. These are back for dealing with like metal and things like that. These guys are great for tower work or ladder work. They have the grip. You don't slip too much. And they're very cut-resistant. They actually do a decent job. But there's all different ones. Just make sure they are ANSI-approved for cut. That's the big thing. Your boots. I am not wearing the correct boots right now today. They are nice and smooth, and these boots are actually comfortable. No, I'm kidding. But your boots should actually have a solid arch in them. And if you've ever done ladder work or you stand on rungs for a long time, you understand why you want that solid arch. You do not want to have that fatigue in the arch of your foot from standing on stuff all day. You also want a defined heel on your boots, like your logger boots and stuff like that. The reason you want that defined heel is you have a good way to lock your foot into the side of the tower rungs. You want to make sure you got a good grip on there. There's a reason lineman boots always look like logger boots, because they pretty much are just modified in a few ways for climbing. They usually have a bigger shank on them, a full shank that goes across the whole support of the foot and things like that. That's so you could literally just have a little tiny metal bar and be on it all day long and you won't even notice. And so it's really important you have the correct shank in your boots. I've seen guys like, oh, these are great logger boots. And then you find out the boots bend after you've been standing on them a long time because they do not have a good shank in them. So you want to wear good quality footwear. It's kind of like when we were talking about, I forgot to mention that about the harnesses. When you use a fall protection harness, do not buy it off of Temu. Do not buy the cheap. Actually, don't laugh. I ordered a harness. Actually, I did a fall protection class 2 weeks ago at the Sugar Factory in Napa. And a guy was like, I wonder if you can get them on Temu. And so out of joke, when we were taking a break, a guy looked it up. And so I went online and I ordered one of the Temu fall protection harnesses because it was a great deal. It was like $35. Came with the lifeline, the harness, the whole setup, even safety glasses. I can't wait to see it. I bought it solely just so I could have a display piece for when I do trainings. But when you buy a harness or you're going to use a harness, make sure, this is one where I say don't cut corners. Get a name brand harness. Your 3Ms, your Exos or any of those. Just make sure it's an actual name brand harness. Don't get Ching's famous harness from China or something like that. Get a real harness. Get a real brand. I can't emphasize that enough. There's areas where I tell people, yeah, you can cut corners on tools or equipment. This is your life. You don't cut corners there. You never should. And if you can't afford a good harness, rent one. Just period. Don't try to go cheap on this. Your work positioning lanyard, they come in all different sizes. You have your single lanyards, they're just a webbing. You have like your cable rope type lanyard for positioning, which is what this one is. This is the positioning lanyard that's adjustable. They come in all different shapes and sizes. These ones you can use the one that has a steel core, webbing, whatever. It's just a positioning device. It's not your fall protection. But I'd recommend get one that whatever you're comfortable using. The webbing ones I've found to be good and bad. If you're dealing with sharp structures, the webbing can be scary if it hits a sharp edge and slices. The steel core ones are a little better for that. You may tear off the outer skin, but the itself will not come apart. Like I said, your personal fall arrest system, your shock absorbing lanyard, same thing. Don't get the cheapest one you can get online. get an actual name brand one that has good reviews, good feedback, easy to use, make sure the clips are quality, all that stuff. And then your cable or rope grab. If you're doing the route where it has like the cable that goes up and down, get a quality one. Once again, don't get the cheap one that's garbage that nobody wants. Just get one that's actually name brand. Other equipment may be needed due to the nature of the job or the weather. I can't emphasize the weather enough. Just because it's 40 degrees or 50 degrees on the ground, once you're in the air in the breeze, that 40 to 50 degrees with the wind chill, yeah, you're below freezing. It's very cold if you're going to be up there, even in the summertime. And you got to be very aware as well for rainstorms and things like that. Because of course, you know, you'll be up there lightning one time, right? It only takes once. It'll light up your life, I guarantee it. But you want to keep an eye on the weather, but you want to dress accordingly. You shouldn't be climbing towers when there's thunder and lightning and it's raining. But there's nothing to stop you from climbing a tower in the middle of the winter when it's 30 degrees. Just wear the appropriate gear. And that's what it comes down to. And people will say, oh man, that's too cold, whatever. I worked in Antarctica for almost 2 years. You can work in -90 if you need to, as long as you wear the appropriate gear. And the same thing applies like your tower work, as long as you wear the appropriate gear. So overview of what you need there for a full climbing setup if you're going to climb a tower. One, we got our fall protection harness, right? We got our shock absorbing lanyard. There's a web style positioning harness or positioning rope. Those can either be the web type, they can be like the cable type like this one, but just make sure that's what's made for and it has the appropriate clips. Other thing is make sure you're using the appropriate carabiners. You're going to use the ones right off your little water bottle, right? Those little aluminum ones on your water bottle? Yeah, that'll be great. Cut resistant gloves. There's your cable lock and safety glasses. And really for climbing, your rock climbing type helmets are really the best now. Back in the day, you just had your hard hats. But your new helmets they got, man, those things are lightweight and comfortable. And I forgot to mention, when you're wearing your safety glasses, keep in mind that if you're going to be up there in the middle of the day, you might want tinted. Like these ones right here are ANSI approved right here. I always have safety glasses. I do metalworking, so no matter what, everything you see me wearing is always going to be a safety glasses. But you might consider having both a tinted and a clear pair on you. There's times when you might need to see a little better, but if you're in the direct sun, you don't want to be blind and not be able to see what you're working on. You might need to be wearing sun protection as well, sunscreen and stuff like that as well. Go ahead and hit the next slide. Like I said, and we talked about this, emergency preparation and planning. Every climb should have a plan in place in the event an accident happens. This includes personnel, whether it's just personal climbing, your club, commercial, no matter what you do, you need to have a plan. What should be in this plan? Who can tell me what should be in this plan? You got to have some type of personnel or somebody that if something happens, they can make the notifications to the right people. What else? First aid kit. You should have a first aid kit on hand. Usually, I won't lie. If you climb towers, I guarantee you're going to cut yourself at least once or scrape yourself or something. I've never seen a tower or even if your ladder climbs yet that are perfectly smooth and nice, wonderful surfaces. It doesn't exist. Even with all the preparation in the world, you might still need a Band-Aid or something, or maybe sunscreen treatment after you come down if you didn't wear your sunscreen. Yep. What else? What else should we have in our emergency plan? Tourniquet. That could be in the first aid kit. Go ahead and go to the next slide. They don't. Now, if you need a tourniquet, I got 3 in my truck right now. So, okay, for the rescue plan, the first thing is you need to identify all the potential hazards in the work area. This would be like the fall hazards, the electrical hazards, the weather condition related injuries that could happen. Because believe it or not, heat stroke is a common thing. If you're up there in the middle of the summer, especially in Idaho, in the middle of the summer, if you work down in Arizona and places like that, heat stroke's a real thing. Fatigue is also a real risk. There's guys that think they can do it and they'll get all the way to the top and then they just can't do it. They're too tired to come down. So keep that in mind.
You ever use a handheld radio when you're ready to talk to communicate with someone else?
Yes, it's actually, you can do that. A lot of times back in the day, they didn't do that, but anymore, your radios are so easily to come by and everything like that. There's no reason you shouldn't have radio communication. I know when we were doing a project, it would have been about 3 years ago. That was the only way we took lunch while we were up in the air. And we just went ahead and used the radio to talk to everyone on the ground while we were up there taking lunch. to let them know how we were progressing and stuff like that, because we were ahead of schedule. Well, I shouldn't say that. We said we were right on schedule, but we were ahead of schedule because we were screwing off up there. But why lie? But yeah, radio communications is a great thing. You're going to create a list of contacts in emergency. This would be your fire and rescue. Now, this may sound stupid, but ensure that your local fire department or whoever your rescue is in the area has the training for a tower rescue. If you do not have a local emergency rescue team in your area, for your fire department, stuff like that, per OSHA standards, you are required to have your own team because you have to have a rescue support group within so many miles of your climb or wherever you're doing the work. So if they can't do it, you have to put together a rescue team. We do. Twin Falls has that. But there are some places, like we were doing some training out by the geothermal plant that's out there past Paul, where they have the geothermal, and we were doing a fall protection. They had to have their own crew out there because there wasn't a team within a certain distance that could actually respond. And so we had to do the training for the rescue team with like the carabiners and the tripods and all that stuff and everything in the climbing and things like that, if you do not have it within a certain distance. These are good questions. So like I said, make sure your fire and rescue actually is within a close enough distance and that they can actually do the job. Because some of your volunteer fire departments, they don't have the equipment or the training. The next thing is you're going to make sure the utility companies that may be involved. Are there any utility companies that need to be notified if something happens? That may be the case depending on where you're working. If you're working on a shared tower with another communications, they have to be notified. Because if a rescue or something happens, they have to be notified because it's part of their tower as well. Or they may be the owner of the tower. Other things is you have to have contacts for this involved in the case of emergency. Who were the people climbing? Do you have their emergency contact? If Jim or Joe up in the tower falls, do you have his emergency contact? His people need to also know what's going on, even though he's being hauled off or rescued. They need to be aware. And in the planning phases, go over the emergency plan with everybody involved. That could be the people on the ground, the people are climbing. Everyone should be together on what's called a tailboard. A tailboard is where you have a group of everyone getting together prior to the climb, and so everybody's on the same page. Go ahead and hit the button there. And like I said, to learn more about some of the guidelines in relation to tower maintenance, under the OSHA standard 1910.26a is the entire guidelines that OSHA outlines for tower climbing safety. But if you want to get into specifics, it doesn't outline. For fall protection equipment, you got to look at the OSHA standard 1926.1423. You can actually Google that. Or if you want a really good read, you get the giant OSHA book that's about yay thick. And it's a great bedtime story. You can read it to your kids at night. They'll fall right asleep, or grandkids or whatever. It's a great read. I mean, everyone will flock to you because of the amazing knowledge you're getting from that OSHA book. Actually, it's a really horrible read, but it has a lot of good information. One more slide there. And like I said, this is just a brief introduction. Just the fall protection course itself can be 4 to 6 hours. Tower safety itself can be a several hour course. This is all just an introduction to everything. But if anybody here wants more information, do not hesitate to reach out. There's my phone number, email address. The one thing I always give when I do safety classes all over the Magic Valley here is if you ever have a question, drop me a message. It may take me 24 hours to get back to you, but I will never turn down safety information to somebody who wants it. Just remember, the best way to proficient and comfortable working with towers is to get the right training, get out there and get some experience, talk to people that have done it for a long time or have done it a lot, and make sure they've done it correctly. I know a lot of guys that used to climb stuff freehand, just go up, skim me up the tower and come back down, all those types of things. Make sure they're doing it correctly. That's important. And it's okay if you have a problem or you have a personal tower you need to go up and you're looking at it being like, I'm not really comfortable doing that. That should be your first indication you probably shouldn't be climbing the tower. It's okay to outsource. You just got to find some sucker to come do it for you. No. They're out there, trust me, unfortunately. No. On team. But like I said, I don't do much climbing anymore, but I know I'll be talking to you more here. I don't do much anymore, but I still do it because I'm stupid. I don't know. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. But there's no shame in taking and not taking a safety risk. And that's one thing I try to tell people. You're not going to be looked at bad or anything like that. It's like people that won't go up in man lifts or boom lifts. It's okay. It's not for everyone. My brother I know isn't fond of heights. I don't care. You can put me up 100 feet and look me over the edge, and I'm like, whatever. What's the worst that can happen? But like I said, there's a lot to learn, and always happy to share information. Now, I think that's the last one. Is there any questions? This seems like
Like, you do your harness inspection, if there's any issues with it, it's not a fix, it's a replace.
it is not a fix. You do not fix a harness. Everything on your fall protection harness, and I'll leave the stuff up here if anybody wants to come play with the stuff. On your harnesses, everything's in place, sewn in place. You can't remove D-rings. You can't do anything. If there is wear and tear on anything, that's it. And in fact, you should have an inspection label on your harness from your inspection dates. All your high quality harnesses have under here. I'm not going to open the zip tie, but there's sheets under here that show the inspection dates when I inspected it. And I also keep personal records of when I buy the stuff and things like that. If I have a harness, most things have a due by date. Like if it hasn't been used or it's this many years old, it doesn't matter what condition it's in, it's due for a new harness. There's no choice.
Say something that climbs quite often, like maybe a couple times a week, I'll undo the harness back.
Well, if you're just doing a couple of times a week, you'd be amazed as long as it's taken care of and you're not getting a lot of abrasion. The big killer for it's going to be UV. If you're outside a lot, that's going to be the biggest killer. But if you're not getting a lot of UV damage and things like that, and the harness is still in great shape, they can last a long time. It just depends on the conditions and how often it's being used. A couple of times a week is really nothing. Like a lot of places I train at, these guys wear the same harness every day, all day, 10 hours a day. And so like a couple of times a week, you're going to get quite a few years out of a harness as long as it's taken care of. They get the basic stuff for something that's not going to be the cheapest, but not the best. I mean, you can get a harness that costs like, $1,000 if you want to. Something like this is going to run you. This is going to be $150, $200 for the 3M Protectas. They're a decent harness. They're not too heavy. They have a lower end ones, but they're really heavy or they're really uncomfortable. Your lanyards are going to cost you probably about $100, a couple $100. A few other things like you're looking at probably about like $450, $500. You can have an okay setup that I'd trust. I guess it depends on how desperate they are, or if they're feeling or if you're feeling kind and generous that day. And it only takes a second. It's like I was telling Nathan here in 2020, I was working on my roof, cleaning my chimney. When I build all my buildings, I have tie-off points put on every building. Where my chimney is, I have tie-off points, so I have restricted, so I can only go this far away from the edge. I can't get to the edge. I do that every time when I clean chimneys in case I find ice. In 2020 in December, I decided to clean my chimney and just hopped up there real quick. I found ice. I went off my roof, fractured 3 vertebrae, and that was a real wake-up call. And you want to know, yeah. And I tell that story all this time when I teach fall protection. They're like, you're actually admitting that you screwed up? I'm like, yeah. And how many seconds did it take me? It took me less than 30 seconds by the time I was on the roof when I fell off. I had just got on the roof. And it was that quick. Oh, no, I still climb, but that was a lesson. I can tell you right now, the first thing I do when I'm anywhere, you're hooked on. There is no if, and, or but. I wish I could have. I just remember laying there because I felt the crack in my back when I fell. And I remember looking down at my feet and wiggling my toes. And I'm like, okay, that's a good thing. And I had to flip over in the snow and the ice. And I crawled out far enough to where my daughter finally saw me and went and got mom. And then I went to the doctor. They took x-rays and all that good stuff and said, you're lucky. And I was like, I'm going to be feeling this for a while. And I was for about 6 months. Had a wonderful back brace corset that I got to wear for quite a while and learned my lesson the hard way. Any other questions? This is good discussion here. You guys are a lively bunch. I can just feel the energy. You guys are so wide awake. But as always, there's my contact information. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions or anything like that, or need help with something. I'm always a big person on sharing information or helping out. So just drop me a message. And don't be alarmed if I don't get back to you for 24 hours or 36 hours. I do have a personal business I run. And so sometimes it may take me that long to get around to getting back to calls and things like that. So I thank you guys for letting me be here today, and don't hesitate to reach out.